everybody, and welcome to Stew and the Gasholes. I added hello,
Oh yeah,
Joe. It wasn't just welcome.
making
So
strong steps.
yeah, I know.
No,
Next, I'll be like the dude Michael Buffer. But anyway,
Bruce Buffer now.
okay,
Cousin
there we go.
Bruce.
So we are back with another episode of Stew and the Gasholes. I am, as always, joined by the Gasholes, Chad, Joe. How are y'all?
Well, we're great.
Happy to be
Oh,
here.
I'm great. Joe's not.
I could go on a 20-minute energy rant about how I lost power, but we just did that, so I'm gonna give everybody else a free pass.
But it
So
is it is very apropos. So we have our guest this today for this episode is Steve Everley, and I think Steve, you and I connected, whether it was LinkedIn or contacts here in the DC area. You definitely follow the news and work with several folks on communications and trying to help folks better understand our energy industry here in the U.S. and some of that being intermittent power. So lots to talk about and lots to reflect on as Joe is recovering from some weather that probably shouldn't have knocked out his power, but it did knock
yeah,
out his power. So we'll leave it at that, Joe.
yeah, we're not gonna spend too much time on that because, like I said, this will just devolve into me complaining for 40 minutes. Um, Steve, welcome. Happy to see you and meet you. This is kind of the first time for Chad and I. We haven't linked up before, so for us and for everybody out there, can you kind of give us a little bit about yourself, your career, and kind of what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on here. Looking forward to it. I work at
We'll
a
see if
firm
you are
called
at the end.
Let's
Say
see
that
how
again.
that.
What's that?
We'll see if
Check
you
back
still
in.
are at the end, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Before and after, right? So I work at a firm called FTI Consulting. I'm a senior managing director here. I've been at FTI for almost 14 years. Most of my work, I'm in our energy and natural resources practice. Most, if not almost all of my work is in the oil and natural gas space. And a lot of the work that I do, kind of related to what Stu was talking about, is issue education, issue advocacy, coalitions, bringing together different parts of the industry, different folks from outside the industry to talk about some of these issues and to really talk about how important energy is to a lot of different voices, not just the folks who make, ship, and burn it. Prior to FTI, I worked for several years for Newt Gingrich. Was worked on policy issues for him at the American Enterprise Institute and then at his own think tank called American Solutions. I was working for him, kind of doing whatever he threw at me, just any issue under the sun. 2008, that summer is when gasoline prices hit $4 a gallon. He went on Sean Hannity's show and said, "Drill here, drill now, pay less," and kind of lit a spark, and people were wanting to know more and more. And he said, "Hey, I need to have someone who's focused almost full time on energy." So that's kind of what brought me into energy world formally. Anything beyond that, I'm originally from Kansas. I'm a Sagittarius.
Like long walks on the beach.
Yeah, I did a couple of years of grad school out in Los Angeles. And yeah, I actually wanted to be a history professor. I took an energy policy course actually at USC in my grad program and kind of realized I was in the wrong field. I just didn't feel right. And within a year of that, I was living in DC, working for Newt. And now I'm sitting here on a podcast with you guys, getting ready to talk energy shop.
It's okay. Joe wanted to be a journalist, so that worked out well.
Yeah.
Some of our best colleagues here, some of the folks who do the best stuff, are former journalists. Sometimes they will call themselves recovering journalists, but
They're probably all got a little screw loose too, so I assume it's I wanted to. I just I found out that school wasn't my thing. So kind of got away from that whole English thing. But let's focus a little bit more on our guest, Kubo.
Sorry, I just it's through.
Hey man, just not to throw us off target here, but like, what was it like working for Newt? Like, was that like a kind of? I mean, being a young guy at that point.
How old, yeah, how old were you when you went there? Right out 24, I'm guessing, somewhere in there.
yeah, I was 25, 20, somewhere around there when I started working for him. It was a blast, and the thing that I tell people about Newt is, separate any of the politics out from it, whether you're right, left, whatever. He took an interest in people who joined his team. And if you were competent and you were good at what you're doing and showed interest, he wanted to bring you in more and more.
Cool.
And he wanted to really elevate other people's profiles. So he wasn't the one who had to go on radio or TV. He could put his staff on there, and he really tried to find, ways to help those grow. So a lot of my growth and a lot of my development and where I am traces back to not just the fact that, oh, I got to work next to famous guy, but that he actually took an interest. And I was actually being put in front of reporters and going on radio and doing those kinds of things and learning the skills that I then, took here to FTI years later.
That's cool, man. That's really cool. Yeah, it's nice to see. I think a lot of people want people to do things for them and not necessarily mentor them. And I think having somebody that maybe would mentor you through this probably is why you're still in the industry, right? I mean, let's be honest. I think if it'd gone the other way, you probably would have said, "Oh, let's go back and let's see about that history professor thing," right? But that's cool. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail us. I just wanted to kind of ask about that.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's great. I shoot messages to him every now and then. And he still knows his team. And a lot of us also, the other thing too is that a lot of us who work together, kind of call ourselves New World. I'm not disclosing anything that no one hasn't heard before. But like,
let me write it down.
Like some of my good friends worked with him. My wife and I met while working for him.
Oh,
like
nice.
both work for him. So like
That's
it's a pretty close-knit group of folks who work for him as well. So just a lot of fun and a really good, interesting time in my career. Also, to be in your 20s working in DC and working in a sort of high-paced environment like that was just indispensable.
Yeah, no, awesome.
Stu, you can take the next question because you're gonna have to say what the acronym means to us because we don't know.
All right. Well, Joe, Chad, there's kind of this big thing that happens in Houston every year. Have y'all ever heard of Dan Jurgen? Joe, Chad, you know who I'm talking about?
I thought you were talking about the rodeo.
Well, it does happen with the rodeo, and Steve maybe can give us an inside scoop. I feel like there's some intentional planning with this, but it's called Sarah Week. So Dan Jurgen, uh, brilliant guy, probably along the same lines in terms of how he has revolutionized like Newt Gingrich, just what Dan Jurgen has done for the energy industry in terms of telling the story of the energy industry. Of course, I can't think of the name of his first book, but the newest one is called The New Map. Granted, I think that book went out the window when Russia invaded Ukraine, but he does a good job kind of laying out the geopolitics, the economics, all the stuff that comes along with the energy industry. But anyway, so Jurgen is at S&P Global now, and he through S&P puts on this big industry conference, energy industry conference every year. And so Steve was on the ground last week at Sarah Week.
What does it stand for? I'm sorry. Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know. Steve, do you know what CERA stands for?
No, I should.
I'm starving. Now I'm gonna have to Google it.
I'm on the website right now.
The wrong one.
Oddly enough, it doesn't say.
Yeah.
It just says Sarah Week 2025 speakers.
All right, it doesn't matter.
I mean, it's so established though within the industry that it's sort of like no one asks what it even stands for because it's become synonymous
That's
with
pretty neat, actually.
this thing. Yeah. So
how many people go to this?
how high can you count?
Yeah.
Oh,
Cambridge Energy Research Associates,
Oh.
founded by Daniel Jurgen in Cambridge, Massachusetts,
There you go.
1983.
I'll learn something today. Look at us.
Yeah. Yes.
You
Huh.
just
Why don't-
you just didn't
why don't
know
we
about
go-
the biggest energy industry conference in the US. That's okay. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's thousands of people who go to this, and it's a week-long thing. Some people stay for the whole thing. Some people go for just a few days or whatever, and they've got CEOs of all the major companies end up speaking, cabinet officials from the White House. Again, whether it's a Republican or Democrat administration will show up. I know Jennifer Granholm spoke a couple of years ago.
Oh, there's a lot of studs at this.
Yeah, it's kind of the cream of the crop. And by the way, Stu, the first book to start with Jurgen is The Prize, which was written back in like 1990 or 91. It's basically the definitive history of the oil industry. And then he wrote a book around 2012 or so called The Quest, which was kind of looking at some of the energy transition that had been happening. But The Prize, I think PBS turned it into like a multi-part documentary or something like that. I mean, it's just
I feel like I've heard of it before.
something you have to have on your bookshelf if you're in the energy space.
Yeah, it's really good.
Here's on this thing.
And it's like
Sorry.
900 pages long. So
Yeah, it's absolutely insanity.
So anything absolutely like mind blowing there at the conference? Anything new, old that came back up? Anything good?
I think just the reinforcement of everything that we hear a lot. What you hear at Sarah Week and kind of the discussions around that are usually a pretty good indicator of where the energy industry's head is writ large. And I promise I'm not pandering here, but natural gas was the belle of the ball. And there was a lot of commentary around infrastructure and permitting reform
Good.
and the current rules and regulations and everything. And you could sense this kind of frustration, but there was also a passivity too. And it's sort of frustrating to hear the frustration. It's like everyone knows the problem and everyone knows what the solution is, and yet
Yeah.
nothing happens. It's like everyone there is like, yes, we are all in agreement. We can't even agree on basic math and other things, but this is one thing that we can all agree on. And we've been saying this for like 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is.
Well, can I stop you there really quick?
Yeah.
What do you think what's stopping us? Like, if everybody's agreeing on it, like, how come we haven't pushed forward with this? Is it political base or like, what do you think?
It's the politics of it. So you've got some groups who want to emphasize, the natural gas, the oil side of it, the pipeline side of it. And there are other folks who want to emphasize the power lines. Now, the dirty secret here is that all of it needs to get built. We need more of all of it, right? Like you shouldn't have to have one or the other. Like welcome to the joyful world of and. We can have both here, right? And
Love that word.
I like it.
and it's like some of the people who want the power lines though don't like the fossil fuel stuff. So they're like, oh well, we can't get rid of that. And then you've also got these folks who are just like, well, you're going to gut NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, you're going to gut these foundational laws and everything. And it's like, you don't have to get rid of the law. Okay. You don't even have to come close to that. One of the executives here, in terms of one of these other, key things here, one of the larger natural gas infrastructure companies actually said the cost of permitting a project is twice the cost of the pipe itself.
That's insane.
Now, it doesn't matter like where you fall in that spectrum of what I was saying about what you're kind of concerned about or whatever. But if you are defending the status quo, you are defending that. That doesn't make sense. And so, but that sort of reinforces the point that I was making earlier, that it's like, it is so obvious. And there are so many people who agree that the current system, some of these laws have not been updated in 50 years. And some of these things are just like, they're just sort of out of date. On the nuclear side, which is something else we could obviously talk about for a long time, but they discovered, and Congress came, like 400 members of Congress overhauled part of what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission did last year, because they said, hey, these smaller modular reactors are not the same things that you guys were designed to permit. So like it can be done. Like things can be changed, things can be done. But those politics there of between we just need to focus on the power side, or we can't have the fossil fuel side, and then all the other messy stuff in there too, just hasn't gotten done.
I think we talk about it a lot, or at least we kind of dance around it. I don't know if we specifically target it, but I think one of the frustrating things is the lack of, I don't want to say critical thinking, but just maybe common sense. I mean, there's so many silly things that we're wrapped up in that just have really no bearing or importance on on changing or on modifying or making things better. It's basically just opinion. I don't know. I don't know how else to say that. It's like that's what frustrates, I think, me and a lot of people about government, is that there's clearly things that we can do to help change it, but the reason that we aren't is because of people. And I think that that's a weird I think that's a weird reason to not do things. Like, we can't help a whole bunch of people because 5 other people are pissed off about it. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Um, I don't know. That's a simple way to look at it, I guess. I mean, you guys are far smarter than we are when it comes to this stuff, but I think at the end of the day, usually the best solution is the easiest one. And when you start complicating it with ridiculous rules and laws, I mean, to say out loud, to put in a pipeline, it costs more for permitting than it does to actually install the pipeline is absolute lunacy. I don't know, at least in my opinion. So I don't know. Yeah, don't get me pumped up. I'll get fired up.
Joe, you've always said it well though, that we as a society we tend to manage like the 1% of like
exception.
we manage the exception, never the norm. which is kind of
Yeah, it's just a weird dynamic to me. And I don't know. I give a lot of people like Stu and yourself and a lot of other people that we spoke to or speak to that work down in and around DC for being able to be so patient with that. I don't think the normal human being is that patient with it. You guys are a little special that way. It's especially in today's day and age where everything's far more expensive and we have inflation and people are looking for ways to help save money. I mean, there's just some easy things that we can do, and the reason that we can is because we're too stupid to get out of our own way. And it just, I don't know, it bugs the shit out of me. So, anyways, moving on. What's the next question? I just want to get that out there for everybody. Everybody knows
yeah.
my position.
Well,
Well,
and
I was just
by the way, I mean, I appreciate that, but I mean, when we go off camera, we, are pretty angry too. So like the reason my background is faded is because I've got 5 fist holes in the wall from previous.
That's awesome. I
well,
love
but
it.
I do think, Steve, I mean, you made a good point, and if we can talk a little bit more about Sarah Week, natural gas being the bell of the ball. I mean, Joe, I'm stealing your question. Like, what changed? We were bad like 5 months ago,
You
and
know what
now
changed?
we're
Something happened
well.
on November 6th. That's what changed. And everybody
But I'm
now
just saying.
get it.
But like besides, I mean, so why did that mess? Why does Trump's message, we'll call it what it is, November 6th, why does that resonate? And all of a sudden you get this momentum, or is it just Houston, the energy capital, that's buying into this message? I don't know. Talk a little bit about, why natural gas is having a moment, I guess.
Yeah, and this preceded the election. Just to be clear, I mean, you go back several years here at Sarah, and you could see that, in some parts of DC, Congress, or certainly state capitals, state legislatures, and governors' offices, natural gas was bad. But for most of the people within the industry, and by the way, even the people who have a lot of renewable infrastructure, the utilities and stuff who are building a lot of wind and solar and batteries, people all knew that like natural gas needs to be a key part of the system. Like they recognize that element, and we're going to have to expand infrastructure. It was just a matter of how do we emphasize it. I know a couple of years ago at Sarah Week, everyone was talking about hydrogen because the DOE was rolling out the hydrogen hubs, and all the focus was on green hydrogen. Some of those ambitions have kind of been brought back to reality a bit, but people are still talking about blue to some extent, which is the natural gas with CCS. So I think there's been a recognition over the past few years that a lot of these plans and a lot of these ambitious targets and things that we set are not as easy to meet as it's easy to write a press release. It's easy to just put a target in there. And if you want to be really cynical about it, if you're a politician and you set a target for 15 years from now, well, you're not going to be in office when that comes due. But you get the political clout from saying, oh, well, look what I did. I set us on the course for this. Rah, rah, me, please reelect me for the next 4 years, and then I'm going to go away. But I think the biggest change has been this growth in AI and data centers. And what that has exposed on our energy system that, for 20 years, we basically had flat demand growth in the power system in the US. And now we're talking about, if you look at it over the course of 20 years and the next 5 years, it looks like a hockey stick, and that demand is just going to soar. And there's debates over how much that is, and some of these estimates are just flat out insane. You're never going to have that level of it, but it is going up. And then the question is, how do we meet this? How have we hit certain limits in terms of what we can do with intermittent resources? Such that we need to either have big innovation in batteries or we're going to need to rely on natural gas. So there's been sort of this fallback. I will say last year was interesting too. Again, just looking, and I mentioned that this preceded the election. Not this past January, but January 2024, the Biden administration announced the LNG export pause, and it was like within 25 minutes, you could not find a politician who didn't want to go on camera, including on the Democratic side, to say this is a bad idea.
Right.
That was a tell. That was a recognition that, oh, wait, actually, this fuel is really, really important.
Oops.
And especially LNG exports, when you're looking at Russian aggression in Europe, that, oh, wait, this is actually not like, I realize you're environmental buddies. And Joe, as you were saying, the 5 people who care about this kind of thing were probably in someone's ear, but everyone else was in a different space. Granholm goes to CERAWeek last year and says, "Hey, by this time next year, the pause is going to be in our rearview mirror." I don't think she realized that the administration was all that administration was also going to be in the rearview mirror. Um, but then during the campaign, when Kamala Harris actually came out and said she no longer supports a fracking ban,
Yeah.
that was another indication that there's been this bigger movement of recognition about natural gas. You're not going to have, the people who opposed it fiercely are not going to suddenly be cheering for it, but I think they're going to tolerate it in certain ways. And I think a lot of people whose job is to be in that middle are going to say, hey, actually, we need natural gas. How are we going to do it in the cleanest way possible? How are we going to do it in a responsible way? And how can we do it in a way that's going to ensure lower prices and maybe, deal with some of this volatility? So that's just a fundamentally different conversation. And there's certain things that the election accelerated, but there's certain things that certainly preceded that by a year, two, three.
We talked about it with the congressman too. I think one of the things that gets overlooked, is we have all these like or we had, maybe we still do, these very aggressive goals. I mean, I live in New York and not gonna have gas and no new services and a gas ban and no freaking gas stoves and all this other bullshit that they try to push through. And I think that like one of the things is there's like no forethought into like what that looks like. And they set, like you said, these unrealistic goals, and then they have to backtrack on them. And I think part of the problem with that is that it's kind of being disingenuous because, like you said, you're doing it for like a sound bite because you're trying to make your constituents or the people that support you go rah rah, we're behind them. But there's no real like realistic like possible way that we can get to those points. And I think that that's the frustrating thing for I want to say both sides because and we talked about this too is that like for like national security one of the biggest things that we need is a country is more energy, and we have other countries and we see it all the time that could give two shits about the environmental impact of more coal plants and more gas, natural gas digging and fracking and all this stuff. And their goal is to generate as much energy as humanly possible. And I think that, like, for me, like sitting as an outsider or just a regular common man, I sit and go, I don't know how safe that makes us. Like, I don't know how, like when we paused that LNG situation, we forced people to go buy gas from a country that we were trying to say was the worst country in the world. Like, it didn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense to people. And I say all this to come back to the point of natural gas has been that transitional fuel for years. It's been the 10, 20, 30 years ago. It was the cleanest, best thing that could possibly happen to the United States. It was revolutionary. And now it's gotten to a point where it's become demonized in the media. And now we have people that don't know anything about anything saying it's just bad because it's been lumped in with the fossil fuel side. And I think that that's really, really, excuse me, what's the word I'm looking for? It's really, really just weak for politicians to be able to play that card. We talked about that too, Stu. It's like everybody's against natural gas until like there's a new administration. And it's like, well, that's not so bad. And then 4 years go by and they go, oh, it's bad again. It's like, stop. Like, just let's do what's best for the country. And I think that's where myself gets, a little irritated with that. I love the fact that you just came on here and said there were little signs because I never even thought of that. But that makes so much sense. Right, like Kamala Harris backing off the policy, like and people, there are these things that most people don't get to see or even consider. So that was an awesome point. No one reads like kind of between the lines or the tea leaves, and that's a really interesting point that you had. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there. I just get irritated when we play these political games and it doesn't benefit people because of policy and politics. And I know how that's how DC works, but I don't have to like it. So
It's not even benefiting people. You need energy is life sustaining, right? You need energy to live. That's the crazy part. And sometimes our politics take away from trying to do that the best way we can.
well, if you watch about 7 episodes ago, I lost my mind where I was like, look, we're making decisions and telling people that they shouldn't be able to do things to improve their country. Like you shouldn't frack, you shouldn't do natural gas, you should do like these people live in third world areas, like they're happy to get a meal or have heat in their homes, and we're over here going, don't do that. It's not environmentally sound. These people are alive today. So we should be making them as happy and as most comfortable as humanly possible. And that's where I get upset. So, anyways, going back to Sarah, um, I have a couple questions about that, if you don't mind. It seems like there's a gazillion people that go to this. I wanted to ask Stuart, actually, have you ever been to this, or do you guys ever send anybody down to this?
I have not been personally, but we have a lot of members who do go. So,
I've never
it's,
heard of it, which is surprising to me. I mean,
yeah.
I've been in this industry for 17 years. This is the first time I've heard of this,
I
which
would, yeah, I mean, I would say, well, I mean, like, there's definitely distribution. Like, I know you guys work more with gas distribution
sure.
operators. And so, like, Karen Harbour, CEO of American Gas Association, she was there. I think some of her team was probably there. Actually, probably, oh, Steve, you might be able to confirm one of our past guests or future guests, based on when we released the episode, Chad. But anyway, Richard Meyer, we also had on our esteemed podcast here, and Richard usually goes. So those types of folks usually go. But I mean, there's definitely, I mean, so I work a lot with the gas processors, midstream operators. I mean, there's obviously educational opportunities, sessions that they go and attend, but I mean, they also like, I mean, they're making deals, right? I mean, you got diplomats from across the globe that come to Houston for this week, and so we talk about LNG and opportunities there. I mean, it's a very very well attended, networking as well as educational event for our industry. So.
Now,
And even if you don't go to the thing, right? I mean, it's even if you don't go to the sessions, I mean, you're hanging out at
right.
you know, the coffee stores,
You can
I don't
say
think
bar.
anyone
It's
said the
okay.
call.
That's where people mostly hang out.
You're getting a Diet Coke,
It's
and
hanging out at the coffee shop.
Steve, how many times have you been to this? And is this annually or biannually? Like, how often does this happen?
So this is every year.
Okay. And is it always in Houston?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's at the Hilton Americas Hotel, and there's the convention center right across the street from it. What's kind of interesting is it kind of has started to expand. So pretty much during CERAWeek, if you're not registered for CERAWeek, you literally can't even get into the Hilton Hotel. Like they won't even let you in there. There's a Starbucks that's on the outside. They won't let you get in there. I've got a funny story about that. But there's also a restaurant across the street called The Grove that
We've been
used to
there.
be like people would hold like little side
There.
events at.
We've been there with Dawn. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we went to the Hilton
And
Americas.
they have like a little outside like plaza area and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. The Discovery Green.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
they have
I don't know.
CERAWeek has now absorbed that too. So you can't even get into that restaurant. So
Wow.
our office is like 2 blocks away from CERAWeek. I'm waiting by the end of the decade. Like I'm not even going to be able to go to work if I didn't about getting a pass for CERAWeek.
That's
The
crazy.
other thing I was going to tell you about the just as a sidebar here. Years ago, I lived in Houston for a year back in 2019, and I was going to meet with a guy, we'll just say from one of the environmental organizations, and he was registered. He was there at the conference, and I was like, "Well, I'm not registered, but we'll just go to the Starbucks right outside the Hilton. It's connected
Yeah.
to it, but we'll just meet there and sit outside." They wouldn't let me in, and I was like, "Hey, he's
Starbucks.
right there. Like, I just want to have a cup of coffee and sit right here." And they're like, "No, no, no, whatever." And so he like went in and talked to someone and said, like, okay, we're just gonna sit outside. We're not even gonna go inside the building. And like he had to go buy my coffee. So I had to have an environmentalist buy my coffee. And
So that's a
now
win.
as a story. He uses this as now a story. He's like, that time, I'm gonna remember this for the rest of my life. That time that I snuck an oil industry advocate into CERAWeek.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I
Mhm.
would like to go to this actually one time. Maybe
Yeah.
next year this would be something cool to go check out. I mean, I would just like to.
You don't like to
Like,
leave your house.
I know, but there's some cool speakers and some people that you
Yeah.
normally wouldn't come across that I think would be absolutely interesting to listen to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what I would do the first time you go, I mean, a pass is really expensive, right? And if you've got business, like Stu was saying, deals and some of these other things, then that absolutely makes sense because being on the inside is so much different. But if you're just kind of wanting to go there to sort of experience it, and you know enough people who are going, book your trip. I would try to book early because hotels start to.
Hey, it's the Best Western out by the airport. Is that what you're
The Motel 6, there's a light on for you.
I booked like 6 weeks in advance, and I stayed downtown, and the prices weren't that bad at that time. But if you wait till the last minute or something like that, you're going to price yourself out. But set up meetings and just sort of being around and just kind of seeing and sort of feeling the energy from everything. Pardon the pun. It's a really good experience. And again, if there are more formal things that you're wanting to achieve there, that's when you want to look at some of those badges and passes and stuff that you can get. And you can get like limited passes. There's a whole bunch of different stuff that you can do. So
Yeah, I'd like to check this out. I mean, I'm sorry that we kind of got stuck on this for a little bit, but I think a lot of people maybe, and at least on our side of the fence, haven't heard of this, and it's a really cool. I've been scrolling through the website, and like you said, there's a gazillion pages of stuff on here, so I mean, it'll take you a while to get through, but no, really interesting stuff. Stu, I'll let you take the next one, man, so we can move us along here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, so we'll try not to be cynical, but and we'll
I
try
will
to focus. Yeah, good luck with that, huh? So we'll look at it. I like how you phrased it, Steve. Like there's some tells when it comes to energy industry, and so let's go from DC down to the states. And so again, try not to be cynical, but I've seen a lot of rhetoric from whether it's the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore,
Start with New York.
or even Kathy Hochul. Honestly, like you've seen some rhetoric with them changing their tone. Can you talk a little bit about that, and if there is any background to why they are, maybe singing a different tune these days when it comes to energy policy?
Yeah, and the one word answer I will say there is affordability. All right. So, and this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. It
Yep.
is now okay to say affordability is your number one concern. There was a period of time where if you were saying affordability and you were, not saying like climate change isn't happening, or you were sort of, just putting affordability above it, it was like, well, you're a science denier. You don't understand the problem. You don't understand that. It's this dismissive thing. Okay, that person's not serious. People's energy bills have been skyrocketing, and that concern. I think politicians pay attention to that. Um, Ask any energy official who has been in office when energy prices spike or when there's blackouts, what happens? They lose their job.
Lose your jobs.
And so, I think you mentioned Westmore, pretty much the entire PJM region, the
Yeah.
largest electric grid in the U.S. Um, they're dealing with a big problem in terms of just not having enough generation, and prices have been going up, and they're looking ahead that they've been closing down base load power and they're not replacing with stuff. Things have just kind of come to a head, and people are realizing, hey, I don't have to like this, but I do like having power on. I do like having energy available. So just kind of going around in terms of some of those tells, Westmore has said some decent things around reliability. Ned Lamont, the governor of Connecticut, during his State of the State in January, said, hey, natural gas is a big part of our system and it's going to be for a long time. And then he bashed the Jones Act because that's what raises the price of LNG that comes into New England. He couldn't quite bring himself to say, let's build a pipeline. But you take what you can get, right? Like if you're the industry, like, hey, read the room in terms of where things are. I mentioned Kathy Hochul. She's authorized, more natural gas to go into New York City. We'll see how all this goes. She's paused some of the climate programs and actually pointed to affordability late last summer in terms of like, hey, maybe we need to rethink some of this. One place that I'm looking at right now is Massachusetts. Energy prices have been going up there, and it's become very obvious that a big reason why is their mass save program, which,
Yeah.
I've said this, it's almost Orwellian named because it actually has raised people's energy prices. And it's interesting, they're forcing natural gas customers to pay an extra fee to get rid of natural gas. Like, oh, thank you. Thank you for this. This is so much better than just having affordable energy. I would say another kind of interesting space, you go out west, Washington State with Initiative 2066, where literally the only state in the country that voted more Democrat than Republican in 2024. The only one, a majority of people voted to say, we want to preserve access to natural gas. We want to have consumer choice. I think they're now the 27th state in the country to have a law like that. And then the cherry on top is Berkeley, California. Yes, that Berkeley, California, voters there voted almost 70% to reject a new natural gas tax because people were coming out and saying this is going to be too expensive. This is going to drive people away. Businesses are going to close. One of the best ones that made a comment about it is there's like a convention center organization there that's named after the first executive director of the Sierra Club. They were opposed to the natural gas tax. So again,
because
and it's
everybody wants change until it affects them. That's
yeah,
the
it's and it's affordability.
yeah.
As prices go up, you're like, whoa, this was really easy when there was no impact and it cost me nothing to say this and cost me nothing to do this. Now it's actually costing me something. Okay, well, maybe we need to rethink this. Maybe we can have a mix of energy. Maybe we can do this thing that everyone knows is the obvious smart thing to do. Maybe we don't have to just rely on one or two energy sources.
I think for anybody that's listening to this, it's encouraging.
Mhm.
Um, we've spent a lot of the last several years talking about, you know, why we need to get rid of it and all of these, initiatives of gas bans in 2050 and electrifying everything. And I think that, it's nice to hear that, people are kind of coming back to their senses and going, okay, that was a little bit aggressive. We need to scale back on that and make some concessions here because number one, I work in the industry and I want that to continue. But number two, I think it's Stu talks about it all the time, and you'd mentioned it a few times. Is the ability to have choice is kind of an American virtue, and when you start limiting people's choices and pushing them into a box, and their prices for to live start to increase, people get really grumpy about that. And I think that that's part of the reason why we did have an administration change, and I think it's part of the reason why this energy conversation is now changing. Um, like I said before, jokingly, everybody wants things to change until they have to be a part of that change. And then they start to go, well, wait a minute, maybe we should rethink this. And I think that that's kind of the tipping point that we're at now. So I don't know. I think you also made a great point earlier, and I want to go back to about the data centers and the potential growth in energy demand. We've touched on that with a couple of different guests, but I mean, I don't think it's a topic that we should walk away from so quickly because it is so important for what we're trying to also the reason that we need more energy and why choice is so important. So just if we kind of dive into that and get your take on kind of the potential growth needs for that, for data centers and everything else that goes along with AI.
Yeah. Well, I want to, and I'm going to lead into that by going back just
Go for
real quick
it. It's
because
your show, dude. Do whatever you want.
you were saying about, just encouraging, and there's a little bit of optimism, and people are kind of coming around or coming back around to natural gas and recognizing, hey, this can be part of the mix. I think there is a risk, though, that, the industry could, potentially whistle past the graveyard here, that there are still issues and there are still very real things that they need to deal with on the emissions side, on these other things. Where we are right now in a political environment, it's always a pendulum, and the pendulum will always swing back the other way, whether it's in 2 years, whether it's in 6 years, but it will. And when you're looking in the energy industry, I don't need to tell you guys, you need to invest for the long haul. You cannot do something every 6 months or every year and try to get that. That's why when we talk about permitting reform,
That's why
industry is
nothing ever gets
increasingly
accomplished.
saying durable reforms, things that are not just an executive order that can be wiped out by the next president that comes in. So I say that because in the data center conversation and the growth in energy demand, it's not going to be news here. I know all the other guests and other folks have talked about this, that natural gas is a big winner here. And, talking earlier about the different tells that we see, a lot of the companies that were investing in the infrastructure here, they were focusing a lot on nuclear or renewables, but they may have some projects that were doing natural gas, but they didn't really send press releases on those. They were sort of just like, yeah, we're going to do that, but like, look over here because this is the stuff that like, we want to focus on. I thought it was telling last year. I think it was Meta that announced a big deal in Louisiana, and they basically said we're going to work with energy, and it's going to be our biggest data center, and it's going to be run on gas. And we're going to be running gas. And you see this in CERAWeek as well, where the companies sort of feel almost liberated to come out and say, like, we're still going to invest in nuclear, we're still going to invest in this. But again, we need it all. We need everything. And that's going to include gas. So what I want to come back to, though, is specifically on that nuclear front. If you are the gas industry and you are looking at this, surge in demand and you're going to be a big winner, I think you also need to look at this and say, but also during CERAWeek, all of those big tech companies, some of our the customers that we want to have for this stuff, have announced a plan to triple nuclear power by 2050. And they're going to spur it. They're investing directly in it. Like some of them are just sort of signing these PPAs like, hey, if you build it, yeah, we'll buy some of the electrons. Others are actually investing directly into those nuclear companies because they're trying to. And why are they doing that? Why are they doing that instead of gas? It's because of that emission side. And it's also, I mean, it's also the reliability side. You can't beat
Sure.
nuclear. Nothing beats nuclear in terms of reliability. But if you're the gas industry, you need to look at that and say, okay, long term,
We're going this way.
our big customers are demanding a lower carbon product. Yes, in the interim, we can have gas as we know it. We can make that cleaner, and there's a lot of stuff that we need to do, which we need to invest in. But looking at something like carbon capture, looking at some of these technologies that are going to reduce that impact, or even potentially eliminate those emissions, or prevent them from being emitted to the atmosphere. I think you have to look at that. I think you need to look at that signal as well, and what that means. Again, not just saying, hey, we've got this great thing, which we do, and yes, we recognize gas, but where's the market headed in the next 10, 15, 20 years? And that emissions picture still matters. And certainly if you look at overseas, Europe and a lot of big customers over there, whether you're talking about LNG, whether you're talking about anything, that emissions picture is still there, whether you want to believe it or not. That's what your customer wants to buy. So at a certain point, you have to say, I have to sell the product that my customer wants. This isn't like Joe Dirt where you're just trying to sell sparklers and snakes. There's actually other products that people want to buy.
Question, because I don't know the answer to this, and I guess what is more like, I know nuclear is the top dog, right? Like I know that, but what is the number one drawback from nuclear? Like why do people say like we don't want that? Is it just because of a safety issue? And it's a part two question. Is nuclear cheaper? Would it be a cheaper like source of energy for people long term?
So there's a lot there. We could have an entire show just on
Sure.
nuclear stuff, but I'll answer a couple of those. So part of the resistance to nuclear is some of this legacy stuff, this China syndrome, meltdown.
Chernobyl.
Yeah, nonsense, right? Like
Gotcha.
and by the way, just to mention Chernobyl, like the conclusion from Chernobyl is not don't do nuclear, it's don't let communists run nuclear plants.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Like that's
No,
that's
I
that's
know
that's the
about
thing. Like
Chernobyl.
what happened there was so unique and everything. And also look at the whole history of nuclear globally. Like the safety record of it is
Right.
just it's incredible. Like it's almost like fake. Like did you cook the numbers on this? Like that doesn't even make sense. Like really, there were no accidents on that. So
Like Steve, I kind of look at that like flying, like airplanes.
Yeah.
One crash, that's everybody because a whole bunch of lives are lost, right? But it's far more effective and safer than anything else. But you wouldn't think that it is. And I look at nuclear kind of the same way as an airplane, right?
Yeah.
Like you only get remembered for that one crash. You don't get remembered for the tens of thousands of flights that went before that. So
the news doesn't report on every plane that takes off.
no, yeah. Safe flight today from Syracuse, New York to Charlotte.
Yeah. Wheels up 5 minutes early. Wow. Okay. But I think another thing is cost. And this is something that
To build it?
What's that?
Cost to build it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you look around the world, like a lot of these things can be built, relatively, on time and cost and whatever. If you compare it to just how much energy is actually coming out of this thing. But again, you have some of these high profile examples, Vogel was a victim of not just, a company declaring bankruptcy during the middle of it, but also the fact that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission actually moved the goalposts on them as it was under construction. So like, don't blame the industry for don't blame Charlie for Lucy, taking away the football. Like,
Right.
So there's some of those cost issues and there's some of these things. And we could go into depth about how some of these cost issues are overblown, about what the industry has to pay for in terms of its liabilities for waste and other stuff that other industries don't have to pay for. There's a whole bunch of stuff wrapped into that, but that's been an issue. And then also just the timeline too. And I think this is what a lot of the tech companies are looking at. Like, hey, we need a solution now. They're looking at renewables and batteries because those can be built very quickly. They're looking at gas because we have the existing infrastructure and there are some on-site options for that. But when they're looking, again, that longer term, they're saying, hey, in the 2030s, we could probably have some of these, nuclear things. And if these modular reactors start taking off, well, that's going to be a perfect thing because it's, and you've got the 4 nines of reliability, the 99.9999, and it's also clean. Like, if we can make that work, then that's an obvious option. But what I will say also, again, and this is just where the nuance often gets lost. A lot of the companies that are, invested in nuclear or a lot of the utilities, they're saying yes, and they're actually expanding in gas too, because they see the market. They see that there's a diverse need here. And that would be ultimately what I would take away from some of these conversations. If you take back, it's not just like, oh gosh, natural gas is just king. Like everyone just needs to look at natural gas. I think the bigger picture is like we need a mix of stuff. We need putting all your eggs in one basket is really, really kind of dumb. So have a lot of different options, because if there's a pipeline issue over here, or there's some sort of uranium supply issue over here, or the wind doesn't blow for 2 weeks or whatever, you want to have some backup. You want to have some resiliency in the system.
No, that's cool, man. I appreciate that look. I mean, if natural gas goes away in the next 30 years, I'm okay with it. I'm retiring. So I'm just kidding. I just think I just wonder if just like everything in life, everything in the world, it has a life cycle. And I'm wondering what natural gas's life cycle is. And I know that we're still trending upward, and I think there's still a lot of good stuff, but I think eventually other forms of energy, nuclear will probably become more dominant eventually, and people will start to see kind of that's the better option. I just wonder what that life cycle is for natural gas. It's not something we can answer. It could be 50 years, 100 years, 500 years. I don't know what that is, but I also agree with you, and I think we all do, and everybody that's ever been on here agrees that the more energy we have and the more possible ways to get it is the best kind of thought process behind everything that we got going on. So I mean, I could talk to you forever. I'm finding this like super intriguing. We could probably do this for 2 hours, which we probably if maybe someday you can come back and talk to us again. We don't get a look into like your world that often, and most people don't. And I think that having folks on like yourself, and we always joke that 7 people watch our show, but if 7 people watch it and they learn something, I feel like we did something worthwhile. And people like yourself are just super valuable, whether this is your day to day, your bread and butter, how you pay for your family, and this is a job or whatever it is. Like this is still wicked cool for people like us. So I just want to say thank you for taking your time to come on here and shoot the shit with a couple knuckleheads. So
we like to ask weird questions too, just things that Stuart does it. Stuart goes, "Oh, did he just ask that?"
yeah.
You see his face. Oh,
We actually attempt to try to make Stuart uncomfortable. It's
yeah,
like
that's really the whole point of the show.
yeah.
It kind of leads into though the 7 people and the people learning about it. Some of the smartest people in my life have no idea how energy is made. And do you have anything like thoughts or places that you can get more of this information that is easily shareable to the people that aren't involved in this daily, essentially? That's the hardest thing for us is, amongst us, Joe and I've talked about it a million times. We talk about this amongst us and what it does to the country, to politics, to energy, but people that aren't in this don't talk about it every day and don't
They
even.
watch Fox, CNN.
Yeah, that's it. They don't even understand.
Yeah. And look, there's been a growth of there's been an increased incentive lately in terms of driving clicks, sort of kind of moving towards those extremes, right? So it's like it's not necessarily what's going to be accurate, it's what's going to be like what's going to get people,
Yeah.
and often that's fighting, often that's yelling at each other and whatever.
We can do
and I'm
that
not going to
too.
I'm not going to act like I'm above the fray or whatever. Like you can go read, you can follow my Twitter thing, like I, throw some stuff around. But like, in terms of information, one place that I really like to go is Visual Capitalist, because they just have these amazing charts and graphs where they just put into context like here's how much of the global energy system comes from X fuel, and here's what the mix actually is, and it often will completely contradict maybe what you're seeing in the news or what you might be led to believe.
Damn, dude, you got a lot of followers on Twitter. Look at you being
How many does he have?
social media. 11,501 now, me.
There we go. Okay, I won't block Joe Sarah.
No, you definitely should.
Oh, you won't be able to find me.
You definitely should block.
The other thing I'd recommend is, again, just because there is such an incentive structure in terms of driving clicks and headlines and everything like that, read multiple news sources. If you see a story, try to find it written somewhere else and see who else is like, what's that other perspective, and put that together. For industry news, I really like trade publications, Natural Gas Intelligence, Energy Intel. There's a few others out there, but those ones that really are not really getting into the political side of it. Some of the stuff from S&P, from Platts, there's a lot of stuff that's paywalled right now. Unfortunately, it's just kind of the business model. But sometimes if you search around enough, you can find some of those things reprinted or whatever else if you don't have the subscriptions to them. But that'll just give you, I think that gives you the best picture of like what's actually happening in the industry and what does the industry actually care about and what are those sort of where's the business actually going? Where are people actually putting money? Because look, I mean, in terms of DC, things like Politico, E&E News, Washington Examiner, some of these publications, they're going to do a really good job of covering kind of the horse race, some of the political elements, and they'll get into some really good details about who's going to move what and why these things, and that is valuable. It's very important, especially for folks who are trying to understand risk. If you're trying to understand the actual industry itself, though, sometimes those publications tend to miss stuff, just like those trade publications would miss maybe some of these political overtones and say, well, that's not going to happen because this bill is never going to move. So
Cool.
Very interesting.
No, Steve, we really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for all the comments. I mean, this was a really good discussion. I second Joe's suggestion that we have you back.
yeah,
I'd
happy
love
to.
to talk more and get some more
You have to
insights.
unblur your camera though. I want to see the holes in the wall.
Well, like anyone from DC, I may have exaggerated the truth on that.
There's only one.
It's only 30. Yeah.
No,
No,
for
this is
real.
awesome.
Thank you, dude. We really do appreciate it. If I ever do get down to DC again, I'll shoot you a message or something. Maybe we can get together.
We're gonna have to have a group of people when we go to DC. We're gonna have to get Stuart.
Not Stuart, though.
No, not Stuart. Or if he's paying.
Yeah, he can pay.
He knows a really good Mexican restaurant. I'll tell you that. He knows a really good Mexican restaurant just close to both of us.
Can you bike to it, Stu?
You can, but I think the time Steve and I went there, I took the metro. So still very sustainable,
The temperature was, I think, 7. So I
That's
mean,
true too. Yes.
No, all kidding aside, dude. I think I did definitely hit you up on Twitter. Is it cool if I tell people what your Twitter handle is? If
yeah, that's
all
fine.
right, so it's
It's public.
yeah, I just want to ask. It's at SAEVERLEY. And you got a lot of cool stuff on here. I was just scrolling through it quick. My favorite part of your profile says, "Opinions are my own. Retweets are not endorsements." I love that. I like that a lot. I might have to add that to mine. Might be soon. But no, dude, thanks for everything, and I really would like to talk with you again, maybe in a couple of months, and kind of see what's changed. I think nothing moves fast, but sometimes I think just the things that you said about like reading the tea leaves and the things that you're noticing and talking about might be beneficial for us to hear and other people to hear. So if you wouldn't mind, we'd like to rebook you, and maybe Chad will send the link before 3 minutes before the meeting.
Just 6 minutes.
Hey, that's fine. Hey, this summer we're going to start hitting summer peak demand for the power system. We're going to see how a lot of the stuff is holding up a year later. So,
Well, it pulled up great for me yesterday. So
yeah, Joe might not be with us. He might just be a black screen.
there might be 4 and 5 holes in my wall by the end of this week. Never know.
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We will talk to y'all later.
Thanks.
Thanks all.